Hello and welcome to this special episode of the Terrace podcast. I am your host, Craig Fowler, and if you've been listening to our Patreon, and I say this not knowing yet whether I'm going to upload this as a Patreon or whether I'm just going to upload this as a free show to cover some of the dead air between the end of the Scottish football season and the start of the Euros. But if you have been listening to the Patreon, you'll know that I've done kind of season reviews on most of the sides in the top flight, those that were kind of particularly interesting when their kind of competitive season's finished. I haven't done one for Livingston yet, because nobody deserves that. Neither of my guests today deserve that. No, nobody really wants to listen to how depressing that would be for a team that really cratered this campaign and crashed at the top flight. So instead, we're doing this special podcast where we're having a celebration for what Livy brought to the top flight. And I know they weren't the most popular of teams to come up, but everybody has to admit they came up, they made an impact. This was only the really campaign where they actually struggled badly and were in, well, if you want to even call it a battle, because they didn't put up much of a fight, but when they were consistently in the bottom two positions, every other campaign they were doing a lot better than that. And let's look back on some of that happier times. And joining me to do that is Liam Innes.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
And Stuart Henderson.
Thanks, Craig.
Really dripping with enthusiasm there, Stuart.
The good times feel a long, long time ago.
Well, Stuart, I'll actually start with yourself, because I've got up a list here of things I wanted to touch on throughout this podcast. But I wanted to go to you first, because when I was sending the list to you both and saying, was there anything I missed? You said, well, I think you should mention the fact that when we first came up, we had Craig Halkett, Alan Lithgow, and Declan Gallagher as our back three, and then compare it to what happened this season. Now, we are recording this the day after, the midday after Livingston were defeated 5-1 away at Aberdeen, despite taking a second half lead. And even by Livingston's very low standards this season, some of that defending last night was inexplicable. Normal.
The new normal, like.
This is Michael Devlin and Michael Nottingham's Livingston.
So
did
bad.
Either of you guys actually see the game, or did you just watch the sports feed highlights?
Just the highlights. I went up to Pittodrie in December on another cold Wednesday night, and I thought I did it then when there was maybe some little bit of hope, something to play for. But no, last night was maybe just even a step too far for me. And I think that the defensive point here is that you go through all these years we're going to celebrate on this podcast, and a lot of it comes from a bit of defensive solidity that's been there. The comparison between what we came up with and that success, but really when you think about Livingston going the whole way back now, since this success has started, has been built on that. And there's loads that's gone wrong, and I think I've probably been at 90-95% of matches this year, and actually very rarely have they felt uncompetitive. But where they have just imploded defensively, and it's been that. And I think, Craig, we touched on it last time we spoke, and I keep referencing the game at Tynecastle earlier in the year, where there was just zero attacking intent and everything was focused on defending, and how bad it was to watch. But it kind of showed the focus that you're almost, to be able for Livingston to defend this year, they had to give up any attacking attempt. Everything had to be focused on that, and that's where it's either that balance of this is horrendous to watch, or what one of them is going to make an arse of it. And really, I don't I think too flippantly, but has there been a game or defeat this year, and even a draw, stuff that's been within our grasp, where it just hasn't been individual errors? I can think of so few goals where it's just standing back and going, that was brilliant. It's been defensively, it's been awful, and that's been, I think, the most frustrating thing for anyone going to watch is you just can't trust them. They just weren't good enough, and that's why we are where we are.
Liam, when I sent you the list of stuff over, so we're going back to the start now. So Livingston are promoted, they defeat, and I think at that point there might have only been, I think at that point there'd only been one team to come up through the playoffs, and that was the first year of the playoffs where Hamilton defeated Hibs. After that, it was Premiership teams winning all the time, fairly comfortably. It was also kind of looked upon that Partick Thistle had quite a poor season that nobody really saw coming because they campaigned before they'd finished in the top six, and everybody kind of looked at that Thistle team as underachieving, but they were expected to beat a Livingston side who had only just come up from League One and just kind of seemed like plucky underdogs that they've done well, they knocked out Dundee United, and funny. But Dundee United were almost like, that was kind of thing that Dundee United would be implode in the semi-final. And yet Livingston, thanks to a victory at Firhill, ended up going up. And the first thing that happened, though, was that David Hopkin no longer stayed on as manager. I'm going to use manager in quote marks throughout this a little bit. And was instead replaced by Kenny Miller. And when I sent you the list, you actually sent me back going, Jesus, I've completely forgot all about Kenny Miller.
That was it was just like a really bizarre. It was such a bizarre summer because it was like a weird correlation between ourselves and St Mirren, who'd done like a very similar thing, that like Jack Ross had done this amazing job with St Mirren and then goes, nah, you're all right, I'm going to go elsewhere. And then Hopkin does the exact same. So then you start off the season with two promoted teams with no manager. And then there was chat. And I can regrettably, you can probably still find the tweets, but I was begging for John Hartson to get the job for some reason. I was like tweeting John Ward being like, fucking announce Hartson right now, like Hartson's the man for us, because he was doing coaching like once a month or something for us for nothing. And then so the two names that I really remember from that time were Gary Holt, who was sort of being pushed, and then Kenny Miller. And at the time I was like, if I had a choice between like Gary Holt, who was a pretty underwhelming Falkirk manager and nothing else, or Kenny Miller, who is raw but could also get us maybe 5 league goals, which could have actually went a long way. So I was like, when Miller was announced, it was like quite exciting, but then to me it was all just like, we weren't Livingston, who had just been promoted. We were now Kenny Miller's Livingston. We were ex-Rangers player Kenny Miller's Livingston, and you're just like, you don't really want to, like, it's just, this isn't where you want to start off. And then League Cup was okay. A couple of really underwhelming performances against lower league teams. Kenny Miller actually scored. He scored a goal, which again was just like the strangest feeling, because it was at Linlithgow as well. It wasn't even at Livingston. We had to play our home League Cup games in Linlithgow. And it was like seeing Kenny Miller score for your team at this tiny wee stadium with like 400 folk. You're like, this is either really shit or unbelievably class. Like, can't decide. And then the league starts, and you're thinking like, it was what, 3 games or something he had. He was the defeat against Celtic, a draw against Kilmarnock, which was the first game. Yeah, first game on the new pitch. And then it was a League Cup game against Motherwell that we lost, and you could see that he was trying, or you could see that he actually had a bit of influence, because we were trying to play it from the back and we were trying to play football, and it was like, okay, he completely bombed out Alan Lithgow, who was a massive part of the team, and then he goes like with absolutely no. I was at a Brian Wilson gig of Beach Boys fame, and I turned to my dad during Good Vibrations, and I was like, "Fucking Kenny Miller's gone." Very strange appointment, very strange period, but just a wonderful start to Livingston's the top flight, I guess. Just having this really fucking weird manager appearing out of nowhere.
Stuart, that was the only thing that kind of made people take notice when Livingston first came to the top flight, because you very quickly installed an artificial surface that, or Was the artificial surface already there, Stuart?
No. So it got announced. It got announced. It was either, I think it was just after the Thistle game. It got announced that was happening. Yeah. So then we all had to become the biggest defenders of artificial pitches in the country, as everyone just tried to say, "Oh yeah, it's fine."
And also remember the first game. I think it was a 0-0 draw with Motherwell.
Yeah, Kilmarnock.
Oh, it was Kilmarnock. I saw it was Kilmarnock, and you just saw the black pellets flying up constantly. Anytime the ball moved, anytime a player moved, anytime a tackle went in, there was pellets flying everywhere. It was incredible.
It was awful, and it just felt very Livingston. Just another one of these embarrassing moments, and actually quite. As Liam was saying that there, kind of, I remember when Miller's come in, you're kind of thinking this feels so like the end of last time around, where we went through our Paul Lambert and our Richard Gough phases of the Old Firm, this, and then bringing in the pitch. Going, I just remember being at the game, watching it, going, this is going to look so bad on Sportsy, and this is all anyone's going to talk about tonight. And here we are, just first game up, respectable draw, thinking, okay, they've actually played well today. This is okay. Because I was quite worried about Miller, and then going, oh, this pitch is going to get absolute pelters. And it has done so. Even when the black pellets stopped, we have a solid 6 years of people complaining about it. And there's been the odd occasion you're sat at the game yourself going, actually, it's okay. Look, you can get a good game on this. But there is games you sit there going, yeah, this isn't brilliant. But I think it's for people going along to Livingston for a long time. We've had so many problems with the grass pitch, kind of the area that next to one of the goals in the, I can't get my north, south, east, and west, but definitely one of the goals where it's just constant issues. So, I think in a way you can understand the commercial parts of it. I think it'll be a real challenge if we were there to ever get back up and they get rid of it. I think that's always going to be a problem for Livingston, and I think you probably got onto it, but it's maybe a positive of going down in terms of keeping that community aspect and ability to generate more funds for the club, because I think a grass pitch hasn't been good at Livingston since 2001 probably. God knows what they were spending on it then.
Liam, then Gary Holt. So as you said, Kenny Miller left the club. The official reason was that he wanted to be a player manager, and Livingston just wanted him to be a manager. As you say, he did actually have some input into how the team played, because Livingston did change their style, and Alan Lithgow was kind of knocked out of the side. But the last time I think you were on a podcast with me, you referred to successor Gary Holt as the guy they brought in to do the press conferences.
Yeah.
Is that a simplification of it, or did he have more to do than that?
No, that's all he done. Like it's so. I sort of.
So we can basically say at this point that this is the point when Martindale fully took over.
Yeah, essentially. So I'll not name names, but I had a very sort of brief time in the inner circle of Livingston, and it was very cool. But then it was also like learning how sausage was made, and you sort of learn a bit too much, and so from my understanding was that like. Hopkin and Martindale, I think when we got relegated, Hopkin let Martindale off the leash a wee bit, and he was sort of in charge of recruitment and doing some of the coaching, but they were sort of like co-managers. Kenny Miller came in, was told that he wasn't allowed to bring any of his own people in, and Martindale was, he was going to have to stay in fair play. Again, at this point, everything was sort of going well, so you're like, right, fair enough, but then Miller, as you said, and as we noticed as fans, like we were trying to change the style of play, which wasn't suiting the players that we had. We were bombing players out of the team that didn't deserve to be out of the team. Bringing in, oh Christ, what was his name? He was so bad. Stephen Saunders.
Oh yeah.
Jesus Christ, like he was brought in to be this ball playing centre half. Didn't work. And then I think, from there they were like, right, Miller's a bit too big for his boots. Let's just get a guy who is happy to pick up a paycheck every month, go out in the media and say, if we lose, just say the players need to look themselves in the mirror, and if we win, just say, what a performance, I'm a tactical genius. Yeah, I think Holt's sort of input. I mean, I think he was possibly the yin to the yang of Martindale. So I think he obviously did have a bigger role, but in terms of actual like football and decisions, he was always second in line. And yeah, it sort of transpired a wee bit throughout even that first season, to be honest, because I think we struggled when he came. We were amazing for so long, and then towards the end of that first season, I think Holt started getting a wee bit more control of things, and then we started signing fucking Chris Erskine for no reason and stuff like that. But anyway, and then I think the following season, Martindale was like, "No, you're well and truly back on this leash. You're only being used for sports scene, not even club TV. You're only going to be used for sports scene."
I bet it'd be getting used for club TV now, though.
Oh yeah, 100%. Shipping out Brian Rice every time he loses is a great laugh.
Every time.
Stuart, back to yourself. So in I think it was October of that season, you get your first kind of big result, which is beating Rangers 1-0 at Almonville. Dolly Menga getting the only goal of the game. What was that like? What's your memories of that game?
It's a great, you're right, it was a great kind of statement result. And I think the most, as much as it was, that was the start of Dolly Menga scoring that goal 2 or 3 times. I'm sure we'll get to the other time as well. And I think great to see that kind of guy come in. But the best bit, I think, for us all was that it was the same team that we'd been watching for a couple of years by and large, and it was seeing whether it was Robinson or Byrne and all these guys that were in the team, and just great to see them perform to that level. But I think overall it was kind of, I still think even Rangers at that point, as much as it was Livingston and the size of Livingston coming up, it was a real buzz, but it wasn't what it was when we get to Celtic. And I think you look at Livingston's record against Rangers when we've been up, we'd beaten Rangers before. Rangers were not Rangers of when we'd done it before as well. Rangers wasn't quite banter years, but it was still close. But it was a great day, kind of great statement to get into it. But I think really when we started turning around in future times to beating Celtic, they became stuff that we hadn't done before. That was us starting to enter kind of territory we'd never been in. But I think that the credit you've got to just give that team on that result was the best thing I've loved about this whole 6 years. And let's get the first use of the word budget in, which will sure come up a lot over the course of it. But it has been done on a completely different budget. And I think that's where you've got to give credit. Whereas as much as we've got whatever problems going on at the moment with finance and court and the rest of it, this hasn't been done by just throwing cash at everything. This has been done, and that team especially, by a group of young guys who all got on together, and there was just a great feel around the club. So I think that result gave everyone a huge bit of belief. There've been some good performances and some other good results, but the belief that gave everyone, because I don't know what about Liam, but I was stood at Firhill just in shock that day going, oh my God, next year's going to be awful. Like we're not that level. And they just found another gear to go up, and with a couple of additions, the majority of them were that level. And in fairness to so many of them, they've went on to hang around that level or still punching at that door to get back in even now. So yeah, great day, great result, and a kind of real sign of what was possible to come.
Well, let me change up the order ever so slightly. So we'll go to the next game that I think you were talking about there, Stuart. Livingston 5, Hearts 0. I had the pleasure of being in attendance for this one. I was actually working at this game. It was one of those matches where, as it really starts to get away for your club, you start wishing on the opposition to score more goals so that something will change. Like fundamental things will have to change within your club. And that was one of those. And I remember, I was covering it for the Evening News or the Scotsman, I can't remember which, probably Evening News. And the next day I did an article and I'd gone back and looked at the game on Y-Scout. So Craig Halkett opened the scoring for the penalty spot for Livingston. I should clarify for that. For Livingston on 72 minutes. And then by the time Sean Byrne had scored in 86 minutes, that was 5-0. So that's 14 minutes of time. But I remember I should have actually had a look at the article I'd done, because I went back on Wisecout and I actually just counted the seconds how long the ball was in play between goal 1 and goal 5. Now I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was about 8. I think basically Livingston scored a goal every minute and a half of when the ball was in play. It was just a mental sequence. If you're watching this on YouTube, and if you're seeing me saying this, you won't be, then you will notice that all of a sudden there's just 2 of us here, and I've changed clothing. Liam's changed clothing. Liam's got a different headset on. and the reason for that is that when we got to this question, Liam's audio was not usable. So basically I've had to ask him it again, but I didn't want him to omit this from the video version. So Liam's answer to this is going to be him wearing different clothes and it just be the 2 of us. And then it'll go back to the 3 of us again. And then later on, you'll also see it cutting back to the 2 when Liam gives me his thoughts on Scott Pittman. Because again, for whatever reason, that question, the audio just wasn't usable. For most of the rest of the podcast, as you noticed, it's fine. But for these 2 bits, it wasn't. So that's why we're recording again. So Liam, without any more waffling for me to explain to everybody why we've suddenly just changed appearances, tell me about your memories of Livingston 5, Hearts 0.
Listen, Craig, if you just fancy me and you just want to spend more time with me, you can just admit it, man. Listen, there's no shame in it whatsoever.
That's another reason.
It's 2024, brother. There's no need to be ashamed. Livingston 5, Hearts 0. Yeah, I can't. To me, I think that was the highlight of the whole 6 years. I think everything just set it up really nicely. The fact it was a Friday night, it was on the TV. I think it might have been one of the first games. I think maybe the Rangers one was on TV, but it was one of the first TV games down at Livy for a long time. Friday night, under the lights. It was closer to Christmas. I think it was maybe start of December. So everyone was already in that sort of buzz where all of a sudden in December, it seems like you play half a season in a month. And it's just like, we're just looking forward to all these games. But then, so the game comes around, and then I remember the first half we played unbelievably well. I think Hearts had a couple of chances as well. And I remember turning to one of my friends going I think we hit the post and we'd had numerous saves from, who was your goalie? Was it Zlamal? Bobby Zlamal?
Yeah, it must have been. It would have been. I'm trying to think the start of that season. Yeah, it would have been him or Colin Doyle. I can check that.
Yeah. And I remember turning to my friends at halftime and going, we're never going to beat them. Because it had been so long since we beat a proper Hearts team. We'd beat Hearts in the Challenge Cup a couple of years prior to that. But when you look at the Hearts team, it's like a squad of number 47, number 58, number 65. 65, you're going, it's not really Hearts though, is it? It's their under 12s, and then that season in the Championship, every time we played Hearts, we just couldn't get close to them. So then I was like, we're just never going to beat them. And then all of a sudden we get this penalty, not out of nowhere. I mean, the keeper punches Craig Halkett in the face,
and it was Lamau.
Yeah. And then so the penalty goes in, you're like, oh, amazing, right, 1-0, let's just hold on to this. And then what transpired in the next sort of 12 minutes was just sheer lunacy from both sides. I think Livingston, obviously, a much better lunacy than the Hearts lunacy, but it was just all of a sudden, Hearts were down to 10 men, and you're going, all right, okay. And then before you could process that, Dolly Menga's skinned in inverted commas 4 Hearts players, and they're lying on the ground, and he's knocked the second, and you're going, right, okay, we're actually going to win this. And then before you know it, Ryan Hardy scored 2 goals, and you're going, what is this? What is going on? And by the 4th goal, we just stopped celebrating because we were like, nah, this can't be real. This is just unbelievable. And then because we had another couple of chances after Hardy's fourth and before the fifth goal, like there was another couple of chances that were like, Jesus, like they're like, we're going to put 6 or 7 past them, but then Sean Byrne gets the fifth, and I think he was another player that sort of just like encapsulated the whole ethos of the team, because he was so hard working and he got his wee moment scoring that goal. And for me, I think obviously beating Celtic and Rangers was class. Beating Hibs became more of a habit rather than something that we would celebrate. It was always just expected, but Hearts, we've always struggled against them, and yeah, it was just a nice moment to finally have that in our hands, that like no matter how many times Hearts beat us, I can turn to my pals that support Hearts and go, aye, but you let Livy beat you 5-0. And you let Dolly Menga score.
Stuart, talk to me about Dolly Menga.
Oh my God. Oh, just... I don't even know what the right word is, because I don't quite feel like Maverick cuts it. I'm not even sure he was good enough to be a Maverick. He was the most unique, one of the most unique, because we've had some in obviously our previous years, but players, characters, everything that we've probably ever come across. And one of the things I probably found strangest about him wasn't even his footballing ability. It was probably like how he fit in, or tried to fit in, just like in living around Livingston. Like, I probably don't know many Livingston fans that are not friends with Dolly Menga on Facebook. And that just felt like something really strange. And I just, at the time, I don't even know if I added him or if he added me. I didn't even use Facebook. But I just feel like Dolly was getting right involved in all that. It just had this great friendship, I think, with Steve Lawson, who was quite an underrated player for us that year, but they seemed to have this great connection. But it's just infuriating. He had pace to burn, but he didn't look like he was going to be fast, because he looked quite heavy. Pace to burn, would never pass at the right time, shoot at the right time, cross at the right time, would do nothing at the right time. But because he didn't know it was the right time or wrong time, the defenders didn't know if it was the right time. Like, nobody knew what was going to happen. And you look at, kind of touched on the goal against Rangers, which was obviously a big moment for him as well. But the goal against Hearts, like, could have been that goal against Rangers three times before he actually did it. I just remember, was it the third or fourth goal that game? I can't remember. One of them. And you just kind of, I think if that had been 0-0 when that happened, it would have been a lot more nerve wracking. But you kind of had that great, probably at that point, 6 or 7 minutes that it was just a laugh. And what a laugh when that one went in. But I think that year he was probably the kind of the kind of one to throw in that was different. But I think if you then look at the amount of hard work that Scott Pittman, that Sean Byrne, the wing backs, even Stevie Lawless, those guys were putting in to kind of make that team work, and then you had him up the top. You just kind of seen them all get raging with him. I do remember Byrne absolutely losing it with them and turning round to Holt or Martindale or whoever, and going, what is this? Like, who is this guy? But in terms of a year where we were never really felt in great risk and we were always competitive, it was a great laugh.
And speaking of a great laugh, and definitely a better player, it was actually that January you signed Lyndon Dykes from Queen of the South, but the decision was made to loan him back to Queens for the rest of the campaign, and then Dykes would join up with the squad in the summer. Dykes was somebody that a lot of top flight clubs were looking at, and I know Hearts were looking at him as well. And it's one of those ones that Craig Levein was looking at him, and I said this to Craig Levein himself. It was like, it's like that he could have had Dykes at Tynecastle, and that would have been great, and with such a Levein type of player as well. But you can imagine why Levein didn't do it, because if he signed a guy who's come for Queen of the South, who scored 2 league goals in the Championship the season before, he would have been absolutely crucified. And yet, he goes to Avonville, he scores in double figures, 1 season, makes the club a ton of money. Liam, sum up your feelings on Big Lyndon, not only the hero at Avonville, but a hero for Scotland as well, incredibly.
Yeah, I think that's been the most amazing part, is like, not very often as Livingston fans do you get to share like the love of a player with like everyone, but it's this guy, like he came in, as you said, like we signed him in the January, and even I, like, as the sort of the absolute novice of football that I am, was like, why are we signing a striker that scored 2 goals? Forgetting the fact that his his partner at Queen of the South was scoring like 35 goals a season, and thinking, oh, maybe Dykes actually has something to do with that as well. Like, just assuming that he couldn't score goals, so Dobie had to do it all, and that Dykes didn't do any work. But he came in, and it took a couple of games for him to get going, but it was just that season, man, that season that was curtailed with COVID. Like, not only was like the whole team was just amazing, but you were looking at this, in particular the partnership with Stephen Lawless that he had. The two of them just understood each other so well, and yeah, it was like, as fans, you were just sitting going, like, this is mental. Like, this guy is actually going to be a star. And it was, again, like, at the time you were saying to folk, like, Dykes he's a massive player. Like, he's not going to be here for very long. And folk were like, nah, he's the best of a bad bunch, blah, blah, blah. And no one really understood it unless you actually sat and watched him for a full 90 minutes each week. And it's one of those that, as much as we got that amazing season out of him, you do also think at the same time, like, what if? Because if that season hadn't been curtailed, genuinely, I believe that we would have been challenging for third. And then from there, we could have got another season out of him, because we'd be like, come on, play European football, man. Like, stay with this club for just one more year, give us it. And he would have got, like, more than, I think he got 11 goals that year. I mean, he was probably on track for about 15, 16, which, barring Derek Lilly, I don't think any other players ever managed for Livingston. You're just like, aye, it's amazing to see what he's gone on and done. And it was one of those that you also thought that we were possibly back to what we were of being a bit of a... It's never nice seeing your best players go, but if you're getting big money for them and you're identifying these sort of gems in its class, and we thought that with Dykes we'll get more of these guys in, and we sort of half thought about Nibley for a wee bit, but that was a bit of a flash in the pan. But it was like, yeah, like, just going like that. This is it. Even though he left, you're going, this is actually quite exciting. But then immediately we signed Anthony Stokes to replace him, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe not.
That was a strange little moment as well, where Stokes was signed and then never played a game, and it was like, you can't hack the artificial surface, which at the time seemed a bit of a weird reason, and even more in retrospect because he's not played football ever again.
Yeah, he was actually on a night out with who's the bald boxer? I'm not a boxing guy.
The bald boxer?
Fury.
Oh, right, okay. Tyson Fury.
Tyson Fury. I want to say John Fury, but that's his dad or something, isn't it? He's the one that headbutted the wee guy. But so he was supposed to go to a game, like, just watch Livingston play, and he said, nah, I'm too ill. And then he posted a photo of himself out with Tyson Fury on a night out in Edinburgh during COVID, and the club were like, you're a fucking moron, like.
Well, no argument there. And Stuart, one of the games in which Dykes scored that season was a 2-0 win over Celtic after Celtic reduced to 10 men in the first half. Ryan Christie was sent off. Robinson put you guys in front. We'll talk about Scott Robinson quite soon. And then Dykes gets the second. What was that game like?
This is probably second to the 5-0 game against Hearts for me. This to me was one of the best days I've had watching Livingston. I think it's just that we'd never beat them first time around up here. Just something that had never been done, and the red card obviously helped. It was definitely a kind of game changing moment. But I've never probably been able to. If you ever imagine for a team like us to beat the Old Firm, you just feel it's always going to be kind of absolute fluky goal, backs against the wall, kind of a real tense experience where you can't really enjoy it. And I'm not saying you were kind of very relaxed during the game, but I felt we were good for it. I thought it was a great performance. The second goal's the one that keeps Dyke's goal's the one that keeps getting replayed, obviously because of what he's went on and done, and whether it's the Scottish national team or SPFL want to kind of keep that content going, which is great for us. But you watch that goal back and go from was there one bounce from Sarkic's long ball? Like, and I think we said this the last time, people. I've kind of always been a bit defensive of people talking about Livingston being a long ball team, and until this year, where I'm like, it is, but that was kind of a hard to. I'm calling that a great long pass because I think that's pretty much it. That's how the Old Firm fans would describe it, right? That's like Jack Butland's getting credit for that, so I'm going to give it to Sarkic. And it was a great day, first time to do it, and an interesting bit I think from it was there was that probably maybe 2-year spell, 3-year spell where Celtic really didn't like playing us, and we obviously got another couple of results. They really couldn't win there. We got some draws, and then looking a little bit to that kind of just when Celtic came back from Dubai and they all had to isolate, and we actually went to Parkhead after that and took it to them, and was it 2 each or 3? There was a draw anyway, wasn't there, where we absolutely took it to them. So I just felt our performances over that kind of 2-3 year spell against Celtic were really good, but it started that day. And kind of what's been probably more frustrating in these latter couple of years where we haven't had those performances, and don't get me wrong, Celtic have been a different beast, but I can really remember looking at the team that day, and if you pull it back up, and I think Robbie Crawford's in there, I think Keegan Jacobs started, and remember, Liam, like all over the pitch we went man for man, everywhere, and just went after them. And I think whenever we have been successful against Celtic, I feel like that's the same in that game at Parkhead. I feel like that's been a real recipe for us, and probably due to how we started the conversation on our kind of defenders getting worse as that times went on, maybe not feeling the ability to do that. But it was a real kind of successful recipe for us for a while, and as you can imagine, being a Livingston fan at home to the Old Firm, never mind going away, is a pretty horrible day. There's very little you enjoy about giving away all the stands and the atmosphere and all the crap that comes with it. But for that short spell, you were actually going into it not too as worried about what was going to happen on the pitch. It was more about having to just deal with the nonsense from the crowd. So you were kind of looking forward to it because you felt like we know how to play against these. So yeah, that game kicked off. I think that gave the club a whole lot of confidence and being able to do something against them.
We'll skip ahead to the following campaign. So it was a top 6 finish, but then the next season, which was the season, the kind of lockdown season, the performances weren't great to begin with, and this saw Gary Holt removed from his position with David Martindale taking over the manager's job officially, and there was an immediate uptick. So Liam, my question is, if Martindale was the manager the entire time, why did the new manager bounce when he came in?
Yeah, it was a really strange thing. Like, yeah, that because again, like the style of play didn't particularly change or anything. Like there was nothing really, but I don't know if it was just removing one aspect or one voice from the dressing room at the time. Again, I think there was a wee bit more trust in Holt for ideas during that sort of lockdown season, possibly just out of the fact that, I think there was like 2 changing rooms, stuff like that. Like obviously everything had to be separated, so Martindale probably couldn't do as much with each player as he wanted. I think they were even split into 2 groups when they were training, so I don't know if Holt had sort of control over one aspect of it, but yeah, it was a weird period because obviously again, like with Livingston, it was a nice thing in a way because we'd hired this guy, or officially hired this guy who had this checkered past, whatever, right? But it was like we were getting so much media attention, and then on top of that we were winning games, and you were going, even like the apprehensions I had as a fan of a guy who had done, some pretty heinous crimes, going, oh yeah, no, like he does deserve a second chance, and this is actually working out, and I think this could be a good thing. And then yeah, but that sort of initial 14 games, or it was something, I think it was 14 games we went unbeaten, and fair play. Like if it wasn't for those 14 games, we wouldn't have finished in the top six. Like because everything before and after that was pretty horrendous. But it was it was a nice initial new manager bounce from Martindale, and it galvanised everyone again. I think it because of the fact there was no fans there, not that there's many of us, but it it just gave everyone a bit of a lift during a really shit time. I wouldn't have swapped places with Hamilton Accies, who I think went down that year, who ran out of steam like we did this year, and to do that with no fans or being separate from your family that you would usually go to the game with and stuff, I think it probably would have enhanced that feeling of shitness. But yeah, that sort of period of time between November to February, that we just every game we were going, we're going to win today, or we're going to get a result today. This is amazing. So yeah, that sort of 14 game stretch was again just a really nice highlight in a really shit time for everyone as well. But yeah, I've no idea how that bounce came, considering he was in charge the whole time.
And including that campaign as well, Livingston reached the League Cup final. Now, we'll talk about the final itself and a very strange tactical decision from David Martindale that goes on in infamy. But we'll focus on the semi-final for the meantime. Livingston beaten, I should have reminded myself of this, it was St Mirren, wasn't it? St Mirren 1-0.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
With Scott Robinson scoring the only goal of the game.
Yeah.
So Stuart, not only... I mean, obviously, was it ideal to watch a game from either home or wherever you watch it and not watch it in Hampden? It's had to be the case at the time. But just to see Livingston reach a final again, and for Scott Robinson to score the goal, because he'd really had quite some rise with the club as well, considering that when Livingston first picked him up, he'd been playing League One football with East Fife, and there he was scoring the only goal, and I think he was man of the match as well. In a League Cup semi-final victory.
It's probably a bit that was missed by the wider kind of public or supporters, but we all certainly remember, because that year in League One where we were fairly rampant, but our bogey team was East Fife. East Fife were the team that we just couldn't really get a result against, and Robinson was always very effective in that, and probably when you look through that team, because of his time at Hearts, someone that you knew as well, so these guys are probably easier to spot when you're playing against them. So I think when he came in, I think he was playing centre midfield at the time for East Fife. He was definitely playing a lot deeper. So it felt like a very sensible signing for us when we started moving up, and I think it was he always just had this reputation of maybe being the pest, but you could tell he was quite a clever footballer, and then it was that place of finding the right spot for him. But on that run, kind of leading to the semi-final and the cup final, he really got that go as the number 9, and kind of went back to being that pest. And what an impact he had! He scored some amount of goals, good finishes, made some of them again, and it was probably that idea of Livingston being that team that we all think of Livingston when they're at it, which is defending from the front or just people being at it, hunting in packs, that kind of thing. He started all that, and I think let's not make any wild comparisons here, because it's still Scott Robinson. But to have, you think of how Celtic want to press at the front from someone like Kyogo, and it's that kind of idea that you've got someone really mobile up front. And actually, when you look at this kind of collection of 6 years of Livingston being good, we've always had that mobility, which is something that's probably lacked until January of this year. You look at this year's been Curtis Guthrie for the first part of the year, which was that still Martindale stereotype of someone big, but without the mobility. And then you switch that to Tete Yengi, and you've got that, and you're able to get up the park a little bit. So Robinson didn't have the size, but he certainly had that mobility, the same mobility Dykes had, or when we were playing Lee Miller, Ryan Hardy had. So you've always had that blend, and I think Robinson really fit into that. And it was just a very strange, jumping on too much this time, but it was just such a strange ending, and Liam might have more insight on that one than I did. But obviously, there was a bit of a fallout with a substitution and the bench, and then he was just bombed out. But that run right the way through to the cup final was just he was on fire, and I was just so pleased that day. Sat in the house watching the game. Thought he'd be the one to score a header. Yeah, just it was a great run, and he's still someone that, if we end up playing against Partick Thistle or not next year, that will kind of be determined obviously soon. But we had them in the cup this year, and I was quite pleased to see him outside the ground not playing, because he's that kind of guy for me that I worry about when we play against teams like that. So I think good player for us, and yeah, it didn't end well, but I think for the supporter side of it, probably no hard feelings in that. He did well for us.
Liam, talk to me about Marvin Bartley at left wing back in a Scottish League Cup final against St Johnstone.
Fucking Sean Rooney, man. Like, so that's I was lucky to on our old Livy podcast, we interviewed Martindale, and I'd asked him, I was like, what were you thinking? Like, what was actually going on here? And he gave me like a 20-minute answer about how he was nullifying Sean Rooney, and that Bartley was the only guy that could have done it, and he sort of finished it by saying, so when you think about it, it was the right decision because we nullified Sean Rooney in open play. And I was like, but not from the set piece though. like, and what? And it was such a strange. I remember, like, so the run had come to the end, like, because I think it was St Johnstone actually that ended that amazing 14-game run, and we were going, oh right, okay, like maybe the reason we played so badly today was because we're sort of saving it for the cup final and we don't want to give them too much. And then the sort of build up to the cup final as well was just so weird. Like, just everything about it. There was I don't think there was an outbreak of COVID at the time, but it was like Martindale decided that all the players should travel in their own car instead of going in the bus together. Now, to me, like, psychologically, that must have been a fucking killer, because if you're sat in the car by yourself going to arguably the biggest game of your career for some of these guys, you're going, holy shit, what if we lose today? Like, oh fuck, like, this could be the worst thing ever. But if you're on a bus with like 20 other boys going through the same thing, you can keep your mind off it and that.
You need the camaraderie to keep everybody loose.
Yeah, and so that was a strange decision. And then even like the game itself was just no fans again, but I was sat watching it myself, and I was just we were on Zoom or whatever, and like to the build up, and we're like, right, okay, we'll phone again at half time, and then it just, like, the game was just flat. Like, St Johnstone didn't look particularly good. We looked really shaky and really nervous, and I think we maybe had one shot on goal the entire game. But yeah, and then you're sort of, when you're watching the game unfold, like the first 5 minutes, you're sort of going like, oh, it's weird that Bartley's sort of standing quite close to the left-hand side. Like, that's quite strange. And then another 5 minutes pass and you're going, he's still there. Like, that's quite weird. And then the more you look at it and the game goes on, you're going, why the fuck is he still out there? Like, what is he bringing to this game? There's nothing that he's doing. But then, even after the goal and at half-time, like, St Johnstone came right out the traps, and we were lucky to get away with 1-0, to be honest, because they had 2 or 3 great opportunities early doors in the second half, and Martindale just kept them there, and he was yeah.
It's been a thing that he's done though, right? And I'm not saying Bartley, but and I think this is where I get conflicted sometimes on him, because there's no doubt he's done well in this time, but the most frustrating thing for anyone sitting watching a Davy Martindale team is square pegs and round holes.
Yeah.
And we talk about people coming in, and even the guys he's been signing in the last 2 weeks, right? You go on the website and read about who they are. No one is just a left back. Right? No. It's always just about all these different positions people can play. And I understand why he wants versatility and budget again. There's the word again. He wants all these things. But sometimes a player has just got a position, right? And one of those guys is Marvin Bartley.
Yeah.
He's got a position. He's at times he's 33, whatever. And actually, the value he brought to the whole team was so great. He's the captain. But it was just such a Martindale thing to do, was to play someone out of position. But if you'd asked me before the game, you told me he's going to play someone out of position today, I was never giving you Marvin Batley at left wing back. Even with all the time of knowing it's still when I've heard him on Liam's podcast, I've heard him defend it so many times. It was wrong. Right?
Yeah.
Whether it meant Rooney would have scored anything that day, we lost so much in that game from it.
Yeah.
But it's a real challenge of watching Davy Martindale teams over time is going, why is he there?
It was just Liam, it was just the second half as well. Like it was like well into 70 minutes, was it not, before he actually changed it?
Yeah.
And I remember watching it, like I remember watching the game, and I was pretty much watching Bartley the entire second half, just marvelling, like mouth agape, like why is he still there? What is going on?
And like that was the sort of first time that we really seen it. And as Stuart said, it's sort of been a continuation. Like we had this obsession with Andrew Shinnie up top for a while. That was class, brilliant. like it worked once against Celtic, so he was like, "Oh, this will work against Motherwell," and then we get beat 3-0 off Motherwell, and then like. You go, but we'll work against Ross County, and then it's like, no, man, like this, it's a one-time thing, and yeah, that I think that was the start of it, and for some reason, it's just like, I think the sort of main one I always think back to is Craig Levein, Scotland manager, 460, right? He at least has come out and sort of half admitted it was the wrong thing to do, but
he's not really.
But then also went, but we've done it against Lithuania and no one noticed. And it was sort of like, right, okay.
But it's always same with Levein when he says this. The thing, the other game that he played it in, I don't know if it was Lithuania, but it was another game he played it in. But he played a 4-6-0 in the sense that he played with a false 9.
Yeah.
Like he played somebody in a central position. Against the Czech Republic, it was 2 lots of wingers.
Yeah.
With nobody in the centre. It made no fucking sense.
And then, but like that's the thing, like with Martindale, because he's so stubborn and like just as the character he is, like he is quite. Personally, he's quite likable. He's all right. He's a nice enough-ish guy. He's just a typical sort of gadgy footballer guy, but it's one of those that you're just sort of going, all the fans really want. There's only 700 of us, man. Just say you got it wrong. Like, it's not going to be a massive deal. Like, if folk keep asking you about it, just say, probably shouldn't have done it. We lost the game, we move on. But it's just the way that he's like, but we nullified Rooney from open play. And you're like, that's not a justification, though, really. It's not. It's also,
although he popped up with some huge goals for St Johnstone that season, including in the Scottish Cup final against Hibs, it's not like he scored 20 goals.
Aye, he's not fucking Cafu, he's Sean Rooney. Like... that was what I kept saying to folk after. I was like, we were blocking fucking Sean Rooney, a guy who goes on multiple Twitter rampages a year, like, because someone insults Celtic. Like, he's not the sort of really intelligent footballer we think he is. He's just a guy with a big head. Like, that's it. And it's just, the more I think about it, you've got me really frustrated now, Craig.
Okay, we're running quite long, so I'm going to amalgamate the kind of last couple of questions into 2, basically. So we'll finish on the ever constant, apart from Martindale, the ever constant for Livingston throughout this Premiership run. But it'll basically, Stuart, can you basically just sum up the last 3 seasons for Livingston in the top flight? Is first 18 months all right, not great, but all right, looking quite positive towards the end of those 18 months, and then the last 18 months, dreadful.
With certain breaks within that, you get the first 5-6 months of every season fine, and then 3-4 months of crap, and then 5-6 months of fine, 3-4 months of crap, and then 9 months of crap.
Okay, fair enough.
It's probably the way to do it. But I think it was actually, I don't know if it was yourself, Liam, or it might have been, I think it might be another supporter, maybe Daniel Shaw did a really good thread recently on, this was probably the year where the recruitment started going awry. And you actually go back now over however many windows that is, must be about 6 windows, and you look at the difference of what's been brought in over that time, and you kind of start to understand why we are where we are. So this was really that change when it came in. That would probably be in the year that kind of last top six finish. Before then, there's obviously been quite a few last kind of day fallout, whether it was the last minute against Motherwell or whatnot, where we were really falling away. And I think a lot of this gets attributed to Livingston. Have got so many players out of contract, and they're all starting to think they're all taking their eye off the ball now. They're safe or whatever, thinking about their move. I just don't buy it. Because I just think every other club's the same. People talk about high turnovers. I think every other club's the same. Every club loses their best players that's outside the bigger 5 or 6. We all compete with that. This was really just about the start of finances dictating maybe, but recruitment becoming really poor and kind of losing that identity. But the end of the seasons were really quite difficult, and that's not even thinking about years in the top 6 where you're just going to fall away. But some of those run-ins, it did fall off a cliff. Some of the performances, which was difficult. But then you kind of, I was having a brief look through some of the squad lists that you've got there, and it becomes really quite obvious when you look at J. Manuel Thomas was probably one of the bigger successes of that time, and the only reason J. Manuel Thomas was a success of that time was because we got money Andrews Anderson. So, it was really that part. And I think the injuries really caught up as well. There was that year where we were really on it and Anderson was firing, and then he ended up missing the last, must have been, couple of months. So Livingston's always going to be relying on a couple of key people in a well-oiled machine. And either we've not been able to get those key people on the pitch, or the machine's not been very well oiled. And that's really where we've kind of fallen away, I think, over that time frame.
So the final, not really a question, I'll just give you both the opportunity to talk about this player. Scott Pittman, he joined the club before relegation to League One, was there for Livingston coming back up, was there, played a huge part, including scoring in the playoffs that got Livingston to the top flight. He's been a regular member of the first team throughout the top flight experience. So starting with yourself, Liam, Scott Pittman, sum up your love for the man.
I honestly can't sum it up. It's, supporting Livy, growing up, you just, because it's such a young team, I don't think we've had a single player that supports the club that's played for us. I don't even think there is a professional footballer that supports Livingston. It's just not a thing. And he is probably the closest we'll ever get to it. I mean, the guy grew up in Pumperston, a stone's throw away from the stadium. Local guy it's sort of, his story just sort of matches how the club should be seen and how we see the club as fans, getting knocked down, bombed out at Hamilton, bombed out at Alloa, having to climb up from Broxburn to Bo'ness, and then suddenly getting a chance with Livy. And it was one of those that, his first game he played, he came off the bench and he didn't look great, but you were going, he's not far off it. And then after 2 or 3 games, you were going, he's our best player already in the team. And that was a season that we struggled, but we won the cup, and he scored in the cup final to set the standard that day. We went on to beat Alloa 4-0, and then the more he played, the more you were just like, how has this guy never been given a chance before? And then it was one of those that you were just always consigned to sort of losing him each year, because you're like surely someone sees this. Surely someone sees that he is much better than what he's getting at Livy. He could do so much more. But he just, after speaking to him a few times, and I don't think anyone really knows Scott Pittman, because the guy literally just never speaks. But after speaking to him a few times, I'm just going you just don't really care. You're just happy to be playing football for a team that's 5 minutes away from your house. That's sort of all you really need. And that's amazing. And it's a shame in a way, because obviously he's not going to be able to retire on millions playing for Livy. But even Martindale talking about his contract extensions, each year he just goes up to him and just goes, right, here's a contract, and Pittman never asks how much money is it? Am I getting paid anymore? What's the goal bonus? What's this? He just goes, okay. Like, and that it's either like he's either got something missing, or it's just because he loves the fact that Livy have given him this chance to be a professional footballer, and not only that, but climb up from League One, Championship, Premiership. I mean, the guy, he's got like 200 appearances in the Premier League. 10 years ago, he was playing in the Albion at Broxburn. Like, that's it just blows my mind. And as I said, it's sort of that's how we see Livingston, is giving players opportunities. There's times that we've given players opportunities that the reason they need an opportunity is because of something they've done. I'll not name names, but Declan Gallagher, Alan Lithgow. You know, and that it's one of those that you sort of, as a fan, like when those players signed, you're going, oh shit. And then feebly, and you know, as football fans do, as soon as they start doing well, you go, oh well, you know, they actually do deserve a second chance, like, and then forget about everything they've done. Whereas Scott Pittman was just a wee guy. He just didn't make it as a footballer, and then all of a sudden is now a professional footballer, and it's just like, it's the nicest story ever. And because he's not much of a character, it's just so nice having this guy that's not only reliable in a footballing sense, but also just as a person, because he just doesn't really seem to do anything other than be with his family when he's not playing for Livy, and it's just so nice. And I think over the past couple of years, there's been folks saying like, oh, he's maybe not good enough, and I think maybe the Premiership is a stretch for him now. But next season, and I think we've seen flashes of the old Scott Pittman this year, but I think next season when we're back in the Championship, he's going to be a massive, massive part of it, and it's quite exciting actually, knowing that he's going to be sticking around for the challenge. And even if we get relegated down to League One, then League Two, and then the Lowland League, in 10 years' time, Scott Pittman will probably still be there, just for no reason that, for any other reason that no one's told him that he can just go if he wants. He just thinks he has to stay. But yeah, indescribable. Can't really describe it. But yeah, what a story and what a player, and it's just something that we never thought we would ever have, is an out and out Livy legend.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think anyone that's played at any level of football can actually start to understand what he's done is just absolutely unheard of. To have picked him up from where we did, for him then to be playing in the Premiership, 3-4 years after that, and then to do it consistently for 6 years. And I think, you know, Liam's right. His game's definitely changed, and maybe in some ways when you're at that level can become a little bit less effective. But Scott Pittman's never had a good first touch. You know, he's never been the crisp passer of the ball. But what he brings to our team, and it's probably back to that thing of what embodies the Livingston that's been over let's call it the Davy Martindale period, because that is just what it is over all that time, and he's brought him in. That is Scott Pittman. That's the one player you would pick out of all that absolutely sums it up. And I think that's the type of footballer that we've all really kind of bought into and enjoyed going along and seeing represent your club. So for all the things that he's not good at that have maybe cost him those moves, and I think you're right, he's had those moves there and maybe chosen not to for his own personal circumstances or whatever. I think Livingston's been a great fit for him, and I think Liam touched on that, kind of repaying things back. Scott Pittman's repaid that back and more. He's been absolutely fantastic. I hope, us maybe finding our level a little bit now back where it was. I'd hope that means that Scott Pittman certainly has another 100 games to play for the club, and I think he'll be well suited to that league and hopefully keep getting back in amongst the goals, because especially that year, that Championship promotion year, and we could touch on all the great things he's done and the goals he scored in the top flight that year, and that goal at Tannadice will forever be his moment. And it's not just that, there was other games and goals he scored in, obviously against Thistle at Ammonsvale, and he's had a great record, but that moment at Tannadice is one that nobody will ever forget. And as much as Sean Byrne did a lot of the donkey work for him, that was his moment, and he deserves that. And I think he's probably surpassed Jacobs in that now. He is the Livingston legend, and he's certainly got enough in him to perform very, very well at championship level. So I kind of look forward to keep watching him.
Right, guys, that'll do us. That is Livingston's time in the top flight. Certainly a lot going on within that period, and a club very much punching above their weight for a consistent time. And I was always, a lot of top flight fans hated Livy being there. Glad to see the back of you. I'm not worried. I always enjoyed quite the Livy experience. I enjoyed a team, as Tony said quite a lot, Livingston are the club that should have an artificial surface. They should have a bad pitch. It's always good to have teams that just kind of have this different identity, and Livingston certainly had that. And so, as I wrote in my column for the Herald, I'm sad to see you go, and I hope you don't crash through the floor once again, kind of a la Aki's and other sides, or like Livy clubs of the past have done. And there is a possibility he's come back one day. But Liam, thank you very much for joining me.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Stuart, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Thanks for having us.
And thank you to everybody for listening. Like I say, I don't know whether I'm going to upload this as a Patreon or to the main show, but regardless, thank you for listening to the podcast. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll talk to you again soon. Goodbye.